mechanic is somebody who can fix something. An auto mechanic fixes a car, a body mechanic is a professional killer. I'm a card mechanic, I can fix a card game.
Ace of cards, Richard Turner.
He can do things with cards no one else can do. He's a trickster.
He is demonstrating the moves used by cheaters, the most difficult things you can do with a deck of cards.
I represent why you should never play cards with strangers.
When I saw Richard Turner perform, I was in the presence of greatness.
About halfway through the show, you can see different members of the audience realize it. This guy can't see.
Don't tell him he can't do something.
He's on the crazy end of obsessive compulsive.
He never puts the cards down.
He never takes a break.
He makes that little sound all the time.
Turner is also legally blind.
Tell them about your eyesight.
People have introduced me saying, oh, by the way, he's blind. What does that have to do with anything? I'm just Richard Turner. You can just introduce me as that.
The statement that can be made about magic is that there aren't as many limits as we generally think.
Don't let anyone tell you that it's impossible. I want to be known for what I do on its own merit because I don't consider myself disabled.
If you think that's impressive, please wait. In this conversation, I sat down with Mr. Richard Turner, one of the most legendary card sharks in the world, for an in-depth conversation. Richard is one of the most inspiring people I've ever met. He can do things with cards that no one else in the world can do. I'm a novice compared to Richard, and I can do really, really good stuff. He has a black belt in karate and is completely blind. What did we talk about? First, his mesmerizing life story, how to do the impossible both in cheating and in real life, and about his blindness being his secret power. It was an inspiring conversation and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Hi and welcome to my channel. My name is Dr. Rועי. In this channel I speak and converse with the most interesting people from all around the world discussing science, philosophy, artificial intelligence, magic and more. If you find this talk interesting, please consider subscribing, hit the bell button and be part of this great community. And now, without further ado, Mr. Richard Turner. Richard Turner, the card shark, thank you so much for coming today. How are you?
Very well, and Roy, I'm honored. Thank you so much.
You must believe me, I'm much, much more honored. When Al Oppenheim told me that he's your friend, I said, listen, I can arrange to have Richard Turner on the show. I was mesmerized because Richard Turner is a lifelong hero ever since I have read an article about you in Genie magazine when they told your life story, and it just blew my mind. So it's a great honor. I don't know where to start, but I would like to start with your definition of a card mechanic. So you have a great definition for a card mechanic. If you can please share with us your definition of what card mechanic is.
That's a really good question and a really good thing to distinguish from a card magician. Card magicians, they will do tricks to entertain, and people go, wow, that's impressive. But a card mechanic is somebody who can fix a card game. That's what a mechanic does. An auto mechanic fixes a car. Outside of its normal context, a body mechanic is a professional hitman. They're hired to take someone out. A card mechanic is somebody who has developed certain skills that they can control the outcome of a card game. And of all forms of sleight of hand, the techniques for the card table are far more difficult to execute. And in their actual context, far more dangerous, because if you get shot, you get caught, you get shot.
Okay, so this is exactly what I wanted to go next. But before this, preparing this interview, I wondered to myself, how many card mechanics do I know? So we have a lot of close-up magicians or card magicians, but regarding card mechanics, I just could come up with a few. And could you please tell me if you consider those names to be your peers? We have Jason England, we have Steve Forte, we have Sal Piciente. Would you consider them to be card mechanics, or they are, in your perspective, magicians, good magicians that do gambling demonstrations?
Steve Forte, I say, is one of the greatest mechanics of all time. He's definitely a mechanic. Jason England is a student of both mine and Steve Forte, so he's a kind of mixture of card magic, and I would call him a card mechanic. Very skilled man. Sal
Piciente.
Sal Piciente, another very talented mechanic. I would call him a mechanic.
So, you know, the late Harry Lorraine, in his famous a magician versus gambler routine, said that there is a profound difference between a card magician and a gambler. Now, one, which is card shark, is much more dangerous, because if a magician makes a miss, so he won't get paid. But if a card shark is miss, okay, so he will get shot, just like you said. And another thing is about show off. Magician can show off, card shark cannot show off, at least not at the card table, because if a card shark card show off with cards, no one would play card with him.
You're exactly right. And a card mechanic cannot use misdirection. A magician can use misdirection. Wave my hand over here while I do something with the other hand. If you do anything that breaks up the natural flow of the game, the heat will come on you. In other words, you want to get away with something. You want to switch a card, or you want to switch a deck, or you want to deal a crooked card from somewhere else in the deck, and you do some other action to misdirect with that, that also is a no-no. So you don't have the liberty of using misdirection as part of what you're doing.
I think it was Di Vernon who said that people sometimes, you know, doing a magic routine, burn their eyes on the deck. They say, I will not get my eyes off the deck. But if someone do it during a card game, a card cheat would never do a move when someone is looking directly at the deck. They are very, very suspicious. They are very, very careful.
And I can tell you stories on that. And that gets to one of my points, which is practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. And I've actually done things intentionally with the eyes burning me, and which is a lot more risky. And so I will just say, watch, and I'll just sit there and almost slow motion, do what I'm executing with the eyes burning my hands. But that comes from just obsessive practice and with an obsessive analysis on what it takes to make that particular move imitate as close as possible or perfectly to the actual move that you're trying to imitate.
Now, with your permission, I would like to mention two legendary card sharks. One is Alan Kennedy, the inventor of the center deal, and the other, now, Alan Kennedy, I'm just showing a book right now named The Magician and the Card Shark, The Search for the America's Greatest Sleight of Hand Artist. And this book represents the search of Di Vernon and Charlie Miller for Alan Kennedy, the one who could do a center deal cards of the center, okay? So this is one card shark that I want to mention, and the other one is Dad Stevens. Now, Dad Stevens is a legendary myth character that Di Vernon said that when he was 20, he saw this brilliant man that could do everything with a deck of cards, including what we call now is a riffle call. He can riffle the deck twice or three times, and during this procedure of riffling or riffle shuffling the deck, he could arrange any four of a kind to be on top. Now, did you hear stories about Dad Stevens from the professor himself?
Yeah, let me just freeze for one moment. My air conditioner came on. Is that sound picking up? So I'll go turn it back so it doesn't come on.
No, for me, it is great.
Sound is okay?
Yes.
Okay. Both Dad Stevens and Alan Kennedy, I spent a lot of time discussing those two people with Professor Vernon. I had 17 years with Professor, and he told me the stories about hunting down this mysterious character, in a back room of some little old hodunk cat town that had the reputation or known for the ability to be able to deal a card from the center. And of course, I developed Alan Kennedy's center deal, and there were some actions in its execution that by today's standards would not be a natural action, the way he had to hold the deck to execute the move. But I took that and refined it to where the deck wasn't surrounded at the front by your hand and some other things. And Dad Stevens, Professor, would describe to me what he called a side second. And I'm gonna brag on myself for a second. You're asking me questions, and I have to. I'll just answer them. Professor described the side second, which Professor worked on for like 50 years. And in his estimation, for himself, he did not believe that he executed it the way it was supposed to have been executed. And Professor, originally, he started describing things to me in a way that he wished they could be done, holding the deck in a more natural way. But in holding it in that more natural way, it was much harder to execute the move.
Just a second, because Richard, because what you just told me, I wanted, to cover later on in our conversation, the way Professor tricked you into practicing impossible moves. This was mind-blowing when I first heard it. Okay, so with your permission, I would like to go in depth into this particular story later on. Okay.
Okay. Well, I'll just real quickly touch on Dad Stevens. Then he would describe some of the moves, and one again was the side second. And
what is a side second?
Well, it's a method of dealing the second card down with virtually no movement of the top card. Standard magicians will do what's called a strike second, which I think is totally worthless. It's okay for magic, but I think has way too many tells. One of my favorite is a push-off second, and then one degree more deceptive than the push-off second is the side second. So it's a method of dealing the top card where the top card virtually does not move as you pull the second card out. So Professor described it to me. And like I said, he worked on it for over 50 years. And then I took his concept with some adaptations that he had made on my particular, my dealing methods. And within a 6-month period of time, this is what he said to me: that's better than Dad Stevens did it. Then he immediately called a guy named Larry Jennings over to come watch me execute that particular move. So Dad Stevens was a real character as far as I am concerned. And one of the things that Dad Stevens showed Professor were two things. One, a bank account that showed he had $250,000 in his bank account, and he lived in a $250,000 home. And this was about 1919. So back then, that was a real fortune, a lot of money. And he claimed that he made all that from his dealings at the card table.
Dai Vernon told the story of, people playing with Dad Stevens, knowing that he's going to cheat. And they say, listen, we know that he's cheating, but we just cannot catch him. We stare at the deck, we burn our eyes on the deck, but we can't catch him. And he said that he practiced those methods for like 18 years before he came out to the public with them. I always tell my audience, that to do a PhD takes 10 years, to do an MD, a medical doctor, takes 7 years. So if you practice 18 years for the second deal, you value your second deal much more than being a medical doctor.
You're exactly right. And I use a similar analogy that the techniques for the card table take more time than it does to become a PhD. and more hours within those same number of years.
Okay, which leads me to movements and slides being moved from the card shark or from the cheating table or the gambling table to magic. And we know that many slides moved from the gambling table to the magic. For example, second deal, bottom deal, side steal, palm, etc. But we have almost none in the opposite direction. I mean, when magician invent a slide, for example, an Elmsley count, the card cheat will not use it. There is only one exception, which is a zero shuffle. The zero shuffle was invented in the magic industry and was imported to the gambling, to the world of gambling. Would you agree that the zero shuffle is the one exception that moved from the magic world into the gambling world?
Yes, it has been moved into the gambling world, and I knew Herb Zarro very well. He was a very, very good friend, and his Zarro was a revolutionary way of retaining full control of the entire deck. But I think there are more superior ways of accomplishing the same thing that follows the flow and the execution of the cards a little bit more naturally than the Zorro Shuffle. But you are right. There are and have been applications of the Zorro Shuffle used within the context of a card table by a professional hustler.
Okay, so let's move on and discuss the best, most important book on card slide ever written, the book that Dai Vernon knew by heart. And I'm referring to the book by E.S. Andrews, or S.W. Erdenez, Expert at the Card Table. And this book got you into the magic world, and it got Vernon into the magic world. I just want to show my audience now, there is like a revelation. This is the revelation version of Expert at the Card Table. One can see the original text with Vernon interpretations. It's like a biblical book. When you have the Torah, yes, when you have the Bible in the center and all the interpretation from the side. So this book is one of the most important books in the world of magic. Could you just please tell the story about how you came across this book with your teacher in the VH room?
Well, and first, just for your audience, the book was written around 1902, 120-something years ago. And it really was the foundation for a lot of other information that evolved from that book. And I think Vernon improved on those techniques, and some others, we've taken those techniques and improved even further. But it was the catalyst that really started the understanding and the people working on the gambling methods and techniques and artifice. But how it affected me is I started off about 7 years old playing cards. I played for M&Ms with my sisters. We were extremely poor, and I wanted all their M&Ms, so I started devising ways till I got their M&Ms. That was about 7. My vision started going south when I was 9. I was sent to a special school for the visually impaired when I was 11. And the head of the VH department was a man named Ed Bryan, wonderful man, followed my career and my performances to the castle till he passed away at 87, 88 years old, about 4 or 5 years ago. But he had an assistant there named Mrs. Smith. And at the time, I thought she was maybe 100, maybe 120 years old, because I was an 11-year-old, and you have no perspective. Anyone over 30 is ancient, and she was like this just big pile of wrinkles, but the sweetest lady in the world. And Mr. Bryan was an amateur magician, and he would demonstrate tactile things for us using magic tricks, a cut and restored piece of rope. He'd have me and my other DVH friend, Ruben Corral, hold the 2 ends. He would snip it in half, put them in his mouth, and then we would hold the ends and pull it out, and the rope was restored. Blew my mind. turn a stack of nickels into a stack of dimes, things like that. Very, very basic magic tricks by today's standards. But at the time, they just, whoa. And then I was practicing with the cards all the time. And so Mrs. Smith one day asked me, she said, Ricky, why do you like cards so much? And I said, because I don't have to see what I'm doing. I can feel what I'm doing. And she found this book at a garage sale for a nickel. Think about that, Roy, a nickel. What's the expert of the card table value now? And think about this was 56 years ago. So that would have been one of the original copies. And so you get the idea of what a nickel is, what the value of a nickel is. It's probably worth $1,000 now. Anyway, she recorded excerpts onto this giant 7-inch reel-to-reel tape recorder. Back then, we didn't have cassettes or anything like that. And it was 7-inch reel on one side, 7-inch reel on the other, and it would go from reel to reel. And the thing weighed at least half as much as I did. I could barely lift the darn thing. And it was something old. And so she said I could take it home and practice. And so what I would do at night, and I had headphones with it, and the headphones were made out of steel. I mean, they felt like you were putting a vice around your head. They were not comfortable at all, because I would lay at night next to my sister, Deborah, and listen to this stuff, trying to absorb it into my head. And then I would sit there. I would go into the back room, and I'd set up this little miniature table, and I'd have imaginary players around there, and I stacked the 4 aces to myself, and I deal them out. And I always had this gun, which to me now I thought was like this long, but it was probably maybe 6-8 inches long. But from my perspective as a kid at that time, it was probably longer, and it had this about 2-inch red bullet on the end, and sometimes air pressure would cause it to shoot. So I'm sitting at their table. Then if somebody accuses me of cheating, so I'd roll out of my chair onto the floor, I'd pull out my gun and fire.
Just like Maverick.
Exactly, that's what I was doing.
Just like Maverick.
Scenes from Maverick, and
this is Maverick. I told you I come prepared.
Yes.
So again, now she just recorded herself reading out loud, expert at the card table.
Yes, and the thing about it sounded like this. Now you take the cards and you hold them in your right hand.
It's like Ed Marlowe.
It sounded, Ed Marlowe didn't sound that bad, but it sounded like a lady getting ready to keel over. And they didn't have illustrations, so I had to learn it with
This is very, very important, because when you read Expert at the Card Table, once in every page you have at least 1 or 2 or 3 illustrations that demonstrate what you should do, how the action should be executed, what is the mechanics of the hand. But if you need to just read it or just listen without seeing the illustration, this is much more difficult.
Yeah, and so I did not have the illustration. She kind of described them to me in a way, and but once again, I had to only picture it in my mind what was being described, and it gave me partial pieces of information, and the rest I had to, I'll just use my word, fantasize on what was being described.
And you were 9 that time, where you first...
That time I was 11. 9 is when I started losing my sight. I started practicing with cards at around 7. And that's why by the time I got to 11 with Mr. Bryan, he would show us these magic tricks, and then I would perform my card magic as it was at that time for the people in what was called the VH room, visually handicapped room, to the other students. And then that's when Mrs. Smith, I got her attention.
I have a side question, because when you were 11, my son is now 11, and I'm trying to teach him card magic, but his hands are too small. And you mentioned Larry Jennings. Larry Jennings hated bridge-sized decks, which is smaller than poker-sized deck. And my question is, did you practice with regular poker-sized decks, or with like smaller bridge-sized decks?
At that time, I had bridge-sized decks for the reason you're describing. But I'll tell you what I did with my son. Nowadays, you can buy a deck that is literally 1/2 of a regular poker size. So it's this much of a deck. You can buy the little miniature decks of cards. And that's what I started my son with, is that, and that way when he was 3, 4, 5, he could hold that thing because it was what was half the size of a regular deck of cards. Bridge size, for your audience, is a 1/4 inch narrower, same length, but a 1/4 inch narrower, so that you can more easily grip it. And it was mainly made for people that played bridge, because when you played bridge, you'd have 13 cards fanned out, and so you could fan them out, and usually it was sometimes older ladies playing it. It was a little easier, supposedly, to fan them out and see everything in your hand.
You know, there is a great story. I think that David Regal told this story, that once he was in the castle and he approached Larry Jennings, and Larry Jennings told him, show me a card trick. And he pulled out a bridge-sized deck, and he showed him a card, and he showed him the trick. And then Larry Jennings took the deck and throw it on the wall, and then he pulled out from Larry's pocket, a new sealed poker-sized deck, gave it to the child, and say, "Don't ever let me see you with bridge deck again in the castle." So he hated bridge-sized decks, which leads me to the stories that you started telling about the idea that Dai Vernon, when you first met him, when he discovered that you can't see, when he demonstrated or illustrated some of the techniques, he didn't tell you what to do in the way he did it. He told you what to do in a way he wished he could have done it. So if you can elaborate on this, because this just blew my mind.
Yeah, and that is such, it really changed my life and set me apart from all the other mechanics out there. And I give thanks, and it goes to Professor Vernon by taking advantage of a blind guy.
This is mind-blowing. I couldn't, I just listened to it, the other day, and say, what? What? So please elaborate. This is mind-blowing.
What he would do is, we were constantly sitting together for 4, 5, 6 hours at a time at the castle, just he and I going back and forth with technique, theories, and so on. And he would tell me, "Richard, here's how you need to hold the deck. Your average card player, or I call them amateur mechanics, they will hold the deck really framed up, because you can do a lot more dirty work when the deck is hidden. But you ask 10 people off the street to pick up the deck, they're just going to put it in their hand in a more casual way." So he would tell me, this is how you should hold the deck. All 4 of your fingers should be on the side of the deck. You should not have the deck curled around like this, or cards or fingers in the front. The general public does not hold cards like that. And the general public will say, if you're in a game, they go, "I don't know what you did, but I know you did something." Or, "Are you getting ready to cheat me? Why are you holding the cards like that? It's unnatural." So Professor told me, this is how you hold it, with the fingers relaxed on the side. And I assumed that's how he did it. I assumed that's how the other good cardmen did it. I did not know he could not execute those moves with the deck in that way. So I started practicing that way, and I would practice. And at that time, I practiced an average of 14 to 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I actually sustained that discipline for 50 years. But at this time, we're talking over 50 years ago. And so anyway, I would practice the moves. Then he would go, "That's it. And then he would call Larry Jennings or some other card guy over to come and watch the execution. And of course, Larry Jennings was always very jealous at that time when he would see it. And he would always say, "Well, yeah, that's good, but Charlie Miller can do that." Okay. And that was his always go out line, is Charlie Miller can do that. So anyway, then Professor, what he would do is he would have me feel his hands. He would say, "Now feel my hands, Richard." And he would show the hand position the way he wanted it to be done. And in my brain, I assume that's the way he was doing it to me. Because when he's executing a move, I could not see him execute the move, nor could I feel him executing the move because my hands would interfere the ability for him to do the move. So I had to take it in stages. He would show me how to hold the cards and then tell me how the execution, the move need to be accomplished. So I would practice it in that way, and I got it down to where I could do all the moves in the way he thought they were impossible to do. And so and if you watch go out there on the internet, watch other second dealers or bottom dealers, and you'll find many places where I'm demonstrating it. You should see the difference in the execution. And I know you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Roy,
definitely.
And you can even elaborate on that.
Yes, I want to tell a story, a very short story about what you just said, because you practiced it because you didn't know it was impossible. And one of I think the most famous author in the history of Israel was named Ephraim Kishon. And he learned Hebrew from scratch when he was 24. And he, wrote poetry and sketches and books in Hebrew. And once he was approached by a priest who wanted to learn Hebrew to read the Bible in its original language. And Ephraim Kishon told me, you can't learn Hebrew, it's impossible. And then the priest asked him, but you, Ephraim, you learned Hebrew. How did you do it? And then Ephraim said, I didn't know it was impossible. And this is exactly what happened with you. You didn't know that what Di Vernon asked from you was impossible. Hence, you could, invest the time and energy to practice those impossible things.
Exactly. And there are some things that I took it even levels beyond what he said. I'll just tell you one thing, and you can go online somewhere and see me execute this on many shows or a number of shows. But most of the techniques in my show are done in a way that he did not think could be done. Okay, but I did this one thing, and the effect is this. I would have someone shuffle a deck of cards. I would ask them what card game they want to play. We'll say 7-card stud. I would ask them how many players do they want in that game. They might say 5. I would say, where do you want to sit, my secret partner? 3rd position. What would you like to see in that 3rd position? This is when I really push the envelope. Full house, okay? So I would start dealing the hand, and every time when I got to the 3rd position, I would hand the deck of cards over to a spectator. I'd tell him, shuffle up some more and don't give me the whole deck back. Just pull out a random stack of cards and hand them to me. So I'm working with whatever they gave me in the shuffle position they passed me. And so then I'd go that round, deal another card. I'd pass the rest of the cards back. I'd tell them, shuffle them up with the other half and just give me any part of the deck you want. I go all the way around the table till everybody had their 7 hands. And in the selected hand, the 3rd player, the 5th player, 5-player table would be a full house. And I always played what was called high Chicago. That means high spade in the hole, would split the pot. And that was be a full house, 3 aces over 2 jacks, with the 8 of spades as the high card. So not only did I give them the hand they wanted, in the place they wanted, with the number of players they asked for, with the high spade in the hole, every time I went around the table, they took the cards out of my hand, shuffled up, and gave me any part of the deck they want me to work with. And that's that's about a 4-minute routine. So I haven't done it on a lot of TV shows, but I think my dealt play is up. I just closed in London, and you can see that in this show, and it's free to everybody. Just my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com, Richard Turner 52.
Yes, Turner 52. And everything is linked in the description below. For my magician friends, I just want to hint, because I don't want to expose too much. We all know that what Richard does is impossible. We can do it if the number of layers is 2 or 4 or 8, and you can manage it with semi-perfect pharaohs. But if the number is odd or even 6, it is much, much harder. And if you decide which hand you want, to win 4 aces or full house or royal flush, this is just impossible. And I think that you told Di Vernon once that you have this idea for this routine and said, listen, this is too complex. This is too complicated. You can't do it. And then you practice and practice and practice. And then you showed him the very routine that you just described right now. And he was mesmerized. Is it correct?
I'll tell you that story and how it went down. I thought to myself, I thought, this is the ultimate, perfect way of controlling games, any game, under the most impossible conditions. So I worked it up, and then I'm sitting at the Magic Castle where he's sitting at the second chair from left at the main bar. I'm standing next to him. And I asked him, Professor, what do you think combining this, and this? Well, I won't say what thises are. And he goes, can't be done, Richard, it can't be done. I said, why? He said, you break rhythm, your hands can't be less sensitive. It's not possible, can't be done. And I sat there, Roy, for about 10 minutes, depressed, literally depressed. I was like someone knocked me out of a perch onto the floor. I'm going, man, he says it can't be done. I'm going, this is the ultimate. And I sat there and was sad. And I stood about 2 more chairs away from him, just depressed. Then all of a sudden I thought to myself, hold it, but I can do it. And I said, Professor, come watch my show. I was just getting ready to go on. So I did my show. And then he came out and he says, so what the hell were you doing in there? I don't understand what the hell you were doing. I said, remember when you said you can't do this and this? That's what I was doing. He said, I don't understand how the hell you can do that. And then he would go, Max, come here, watch this. And they'd say, how many players do you want? Where do you want to sit? What game do you want? And I'd do it over and over. It's follow some other guy. And for not just a day, 18 months straight, every time we were together, he would just call someone over and say, watch this. And I'd do it over and over. And then about 2 years later, he finally said, I still don't understand how the hell you can do that.
Okay, now, since our audience is both magicians and non-magicians, or as we call it in Harry Potter layman, I don't want to tip too much, but there is one technique that is mandatory for what you do. And this technique is called wiffle stacking, the idea of stacking the decks while shuffling it. And Erdenes doesn't mention it in his book, and it's rarely mentioned. Jason England mentioned it once in a Blue Moon. Let's say that someone wants to learn the concept of wiffle stacking. Where can he find sources to learn those techniques?
Well, here's an interesting thing.
And if you don't want, don't tell.
Oh,
but you must share at least one thing.
The question will be answered in my answer to your question. I've read 2 books in my life. One was Parts from Expert of the Card Table from the recording. 2 was Seconds, Centers, and Bottoms by Ed Marlowe. And when I read that one, which was like 50 years ago, the woman that read it to me, she could not stand it. She'd read one time, 1 page, and that was it. And then we go to the next one, 1 page, and I didn't have recording abilities back then. So that's all I've ever read. I learned all my stuff. I had the privilege of knowing the writers and the authors of these books. I knew them intimately. And so I got my knowledge from actually sitting down with those people. So to answer your question, I'm a bad person to ask for resources on where to find things. Okay. Other than, I will say this, I do have a series of DVDs. The Cheat DVD, which was a classic, and it has about 100 different moves and techniques shown in it, and it's still considered one of the best DVDs ever made on card table technique. And then I have about 7 or 8 other videos after that, emphasizing shuffling, stacking, palming, and whatever else. But and I only produce those just to document my work for posterity. And and I'm not trying to sell those DVDs. Let me just tell that to you. If you want to get them, you can. I'm just saying that that's the only source that I know.
They're not suited for non-very technical magicians. So it's not, if you're not very technical magician, those DVD means, I think, nothing for you. Okay?
It means nothing to them.
Yeah. And another thing that with your permission, I want to ask is I do some of my routines blindfold. And if I know the order of the deck or some of the cards in the deck, I can carry on. But there is one thing that is very hard for me to do while blindfold, and this is a perfect Pharaoh riffle shuffle. So now you can't see me, but I'm going to demonstrate to the audience what a perfect Pharaoh shuffle is in order for them to understand, okay? So the idea is that you take half of the card and you need to put them in the other half. And this is a mathematical shuffling. And when I say a mathematical shuffling, if I do this shuffle 8 times in a row, the deck will come back to its original order. And I cannot do a perfect Pharaoh shuffle while blindfold because I need to check if every card is in the correct spot. For example, now I missed one, and I cannot do it just by feel. And my question is to you, I tried to search for your use of the Pharaoh shuffle, and I didn't see it. Can you tell if you missed some card when you Pharaoh shuffle, or you just never miss?
Well, I do miss. And just so you know, if you do 8 perfect out Pharaohs, it'll return. Yes. Or you can make it easier on yourself. If you do 52 in Pharaohs, the same thing will happen. So maybe you just need to do more shuffles. Add 50, do 52 instead of 8. And that was a joke. But yes, no, I have my ways of trying by feel that trying to determine if I have missed, but I do miss. But there are things that I do where I don't have the option of missing, so I do my best not to miss.
Okay, and which I think leads me to what you say. You have a very high sensitivity, and in your Dealt documentary, you said that cards are like wine, and you have over 5,000 unique decks, not just decks, but unique decks that you save them like people save wine bottles. And you say, wow, year 1997 was a very good year for the United States Playing Card Company. And one can feel the textures of the cards. And in the Jenny magazine, they said that the US Playing Card Company, you know, the one who manufactured bicycle and tally ho and everything, they sent you cards in order to inspect them. Could you please elaborate on this? Because it's just behind my imagination to grasp.
Yeah, I've first started in 1988 when I received 3 gross of cards. At that time, I'd reorder when I was down to like 500 decks. And I went, these cards are lousy. I'd use another word, but I want to be polite. They were really bad. And I said, they didn't last 7 minutes. In casino play and a handheld game, they meant to last 30 minutes. And so I called them up. I said, these are not the same cards you have been making for 100 years. They can prove it. They sent somebody out. I went through all these tests. I won't elaborate on it for time's sake. And they went back and I was right. I told them, you are subcontracting your paper out. You are not making your paper in-house, which is what U.S. Playing Card Company is known for. They make their own paper. Other big card makers do not. So anyway, I told them, you subcontract your paper out. They got back to me and said, you are right. We have been. And within 30 days, we hope to be putting it back in-house. It took 60 days. They said, what can we do to make you happy? I said, take all these cards you brought to me and give me pre-cards made before these were ran. And so they did that. 1993, again, they started punching their cards the wrong direction. A deck of cards is a sheet of 56 cards sliced into 7 rows of 8 cards in each thing, stacked and then punched like a cookie cutter, punches them into the shape of a card and they fall into a stack. They turn the deck over where the cards were now being punched with the rounded edge going in from the backside, which put the rounded edge on the top and the rough edge on the bottom. And almost every shuffle, you start from the bottom and you work your way up. You thumb up. So you have the rounded edge going with you. When they're cut the wrong direction, the rough edge is going with you, and it makes for a non-user-friendly deck. And at that time, the casinos were complaining because they knew something was wrong with their cards, but they couldn't figure out what. I'm the one that brought that to attention, and we identified what the problem was, and they changed that process back to the old way. Okay, so then they finally said, we hate to admit it, but you've been proven right, is what their analysis was at USPC. And so they asked if they put me on retainer as their touch analyst. And so I've been their touch analyst for 3 decades now, and they still make the best product in the world. And I've tested and know all products. So anyway, they will send me a dozen decks of cards. They have a secret code on them that I do not know. And I will have to take, say there's a dozen. So there's 6 pairs. Not only will I have to match those 6 pairs, like 1 is 3, 4 is 7, and so on, they will have one of those pairs maybe had a different chemical in the makeup of the coding. So now I had to separate all the pairs, identifying them by touch, and then I would have to find the one that was different and then analyze how well the card, the snap of the card, the moisture level of the card, the longevity, what I call the ripe period, and a half a dozen other things that I would give them information on to help them make a better card. So I actually, somewhere in this house, I actually have a huge box of all these cards that I've tested for them over the years. And but they still make the best card in the world. And now they were bought by Cartamundi. Cartamundi is most of the European cards were made by Cartamundi, and Cartamundi's been around for 250 years, and USBC's been around for 150 years. And of course, the most recognized label in the world is bicycle. I would go as far as to say it's probably the most recognized brand in history. Maybe
I must tell you one thing.
Coca-Cola.
I must tell you one thing, because bicycle decks, I'm really ashamed that my deck of bicycle right now is called Seconds, which is a lower quality, and I'm going to show you a lower quality deck of bicycle cards. So I'm terribly sorry. I didn't come prepared. I have a second poker bicycle, and I have 2 questions. One, do you think that this level of ability, of expertise, of dexterity with your touch was possible without you losing your sight? Or this is just that your senses became so focused since that you lost your sight vision?
And that is one of the elements that I have over, I'm sorry, all you poor-sighted people. I feel sorry for you, and I don't feel that sorry for you, but I feel sorry for you because you're just average.
Okay. And another thing,
but
yes.
you're if I could elaborate on that, yes. And I've actually been interviewed by neuroscientists from Harvard all the way to Moscow, head of neuroscience department at Moscow University. And what they described, what happened was my macula, first my macula went, but then my retina finally fully dissolved. So I have no retina, and you cannot see without a retina. And so the parts of the brain, the neural parts of the brain that relate to touch, those areas have bullied their way into my tactile my tactile neural network, which is the part of the brain that relates to touch. And so two parts of the brain have now merged together and they've made a greater whole. And that's partly one of the medical reasons that I have the touch that I do. And I'll just give a little aside on that. I'm scheduled to be part of a massive neuroscience experiment where they're going to be hooking me up to these major a 7T fMRI, a 7T MRI machine, which is like 4 times more powerful than your standard MRI machine. And there's 4 different doctors, scientists, brain scientists, that one understands why does the brain see color and shape, and each one has their specialty. And if everything goes according to schedule, they will be hooking me up and try to understand why my brain is able to do the things that it does. And there's other elements in that, but that's another subject if you want to get off on that rabbit hole.
Just a second. Now, a good average magician, one who can see, can distinguish between 32 cards and 33 cards. Okay, he can weigh the card, he can estimate the card, and if you practice, it is possible. What you just described, this is beyond the level of what any good magician can do. The idea of feeling or this level of dexterity is amazing. And I want to tell you a little story about bicycle cards, because like you said, bicycle are the most famous cards in the world. Okay, in every American household, there is a bicycle deck somewhere. Okay, but in Israel, we don't have bicycle decks. And whenever a magician pulls out his deck, his bicycle decks, people say, this is a trick deck, because no one in Israel knows what a bicycle deck is. In fact, you can say for sure that if you see someone with a bicycle decks, for 100%, this guy is a magician.
What kind of decks do you have in Israel, and who makes them? Are you sure it's not a subsidiary of USPC?
Very. We have like Piantnik decks, or very cheap, a $1 deck. Or we don't have the bicycle deck, and the bicycle deck, it's not plastic. It's paper with a finish. In bicycle, it is air cushion. In tally-ho, it's something different, which, many people will say that card flourish are better with tally-ho. We see nowadays many magicians in the US prefer, I don't know why, tally-hos over bicycle. Would you agree that there is a tendency, at least in penguin magic lectures, that you see more and more magicians use tally-ho instead of bicycle?
Well, I think more people use the bicycle, but tally-ho is also made by the same company. B is awesome. I'm a B man. Yes. And the bicycle deck, they started making them in 1885. The B deck, they started making 1892, which is what the 92 stands for on the deck, the year they started making them. And for 100 years, the B was also always the premium deck made with a little bit higher grade of paper. And so whenever you'd go into a drugstore,
for my audience, this is the B deck and this is a bicycle deck, and one can see that the bicycle has this border and B has no borders, which means that when you deal, I don't know, the second card, it will be much easier to do when you have a B deck, borderless deck, instead of a bicycle deck.
Yes, but the downside for the magician is if you have a card reversed in a B deck, you're busted. So the magicians have a hard time with the B because of the fact that there is not a border, and for many tricks, you could not do an Elmsley count with a B deck. There's a lot of limitations with the B deck, but you're right, it is more deceptive with some false deals like seconds. But I demonstrate a bicycle and a B, and if your execution is, I'll just use the word perfect, if your execution is correct, the second card coming out with a bicycle can be as deceptive as with B.
But not with a strike second. Not with a strike.
No way. Strike second is for kids.
Strike second is for kids. Oh, thank you so much. Okay.
Yeah.
And one last thing before I will ask you to demonstrate one thing, and then we move on to the more advanced questions. You told me in the email before we started the conversation that you just came back from a meeting with the US playing card company. That you are you are just you are making business with the US playing card company because you're so good, you're such an expert in sensing cards. Could you please elaborate on the business that you're doing beyond what you just told me?
Yes, well, I have a tech company called 52 Productions with my co-founder, which I bet everybody in Israel knows by association, maybe not by name. His name is Adam Cheyer, spelled Cheyer. He's best known as the man who invented Siri.
And then
He's
Bixby.
called and Bixby, and Sentient, which was a machine learning company, and Change.org, which has 500 million subscribers. All of these became billion-dollar values. His Siri is on 2 billion Apple devices. His Bixby is on about 800 million Samsung devices. Anyway, he's called the father of voice AI. And we have an AI company, and we're taking all games. I have a number of intellectual properties that I have created in a patent on what's called a conversational gaming table or conversational gaming platform. And what we're doing is we're going to make it possible for you to play. It'll start off with a couple of my original games, Shark Showdown, Batty, Texas Showdown. And then that platform will be opened up to all other people that have some sort of game. It could be Texas Hold'em, black, everything under the sun, and you'll be able to play it all by voice. So, and what Adam did is he hooked his technology, his voice AI technology, and one of the cool things he did is he hooked it up to ChatGPT, which is text to text, and then he had the output is that text to text. We go back to text to speech. So all the information that is on the AI ChatGPT can now be incorporated within the play of our games. And at the same time, we are also developing our own AI technologies in these areas. And it turned out we're like, all of a sudden AI is the big thing. And we've been working on this for a few years. So we're kind of ahead of the game in this space. Anyway, so that, and one of the games that I created is a logic game called Batty. And I could actually play it for you here, or I could even have you play it over there. And it's one of the things I'm demonstrating using my unusual visual abilities, in that I see my subconscious projected in front of me like on a giant movie screen. I have massive output, no input. I cannot see anything coming in, but my output is massive. And that's another subject we can tap into if you want. But because of most of our games right now have a deck as part of the game, and then Batty is a logic game using cards. USPC, the CEO of USPC, Tricia, and the CEO of their parent company, Carter Monday, we've been meeting, and then they flew out. They wanted to meet in Hollywood, so we flew out and met together. And they were in negotiations for turning Batty in particular. It's like a BATTY. It's a logic game that you can play solitarily, and you can always resolve it. And with the app, you can play it with 1 million people at the same time. Okay, and so we're partnering up to bring these products to the world. And they have another big event coming up called Cartopia, CARDTOPIA, Cartopia. And it's like utopia, but with cards. And there's going to be all kinds of events covering close-up magic, the people that like to do the cardistry, every element of magic cards and so on. And then we're expanding it out to you come as characters, like your favorite characters, Maverick, and anyway. So it's going to be a big event. It's going to take place November 4th in New York. Wow. And so we're starting a massive campaign, and that's one of the reasons why they wanted to meet up, because they want me to act as the host and feature performer. And I was their feature speaker last year at the first Card Con, is what it was called, but it was now Cardtopia. And so anyway, it's going to be catering to magicians, card players, from one end of the world to the other, and where there's different elements. They will partially do the brick and mortar versions, the tangible products that you can play with your hands. And then our technology, we're creating those same things where you'll be able to play on all mobile devices. You'll have your Apple, your iPhone, your tablets, whatever. You'll be able to log in and play on them, and you can log in where we have a server that will host you up with another players, another people, and they're actually using my voice and my image as the dealer. And one of our guys, his name is Charles Park. He was one of the founders of Gaia Interactive, which became a massive game creating company, and he actually was the pioneer of what's called virtual currencies, where you can
Gaia Interactive produced hits like Monster Galaxy and others. So if you're familiar with Monster Galaxy, this is what this guy has done. For me, it's like a dream come true, because I'm a magician by night. I love magic, as you can probably tell. And I'm a researcher of AI by day. This is what I do at the university in the context of NLP and automatic speech recognition and all the other things. This is exactly what I do. So, the combination of magic and sleight of hand along with AI sounds like a really a dream come true.
A great marriage.
Yes,
and it's gonna make it. And the thing about our platform, it's gonna bring in people that were never able to be a part of this ecosystem. I'll explain what I'm saying. I'm a perfect example. There's a lot of games I cannot play because I can't see my down card. Okay, when you're playing our game, say you have a down card, the AI, I can have conversations with other players. This is part of what we're developing. I'll be able to say, Roy, I'm going to play for your Ace of Spades, okay? And the other players will see that. But now we're dealt a card face down. And I don't want you to know my down card, but I need to know it so I know if I should bet or not. I can then have a secret conversation with the voice AI or the AI dealer, and we're going to call it Shark. I'm the card shark, so it will be me right now. I'll be the dealer. I'll say, "Hey Shark, what's my down card?" And it will privately tell me what my down card is. So that's going to bring the visually impaired people. Then in the United States alone, we have like 12 million people that can't see, or people that have no arms or cannot do it. That's another like 48 million people just in the United States. So those people that were left out of that ecosystem of being able to play apps and games on mobile devices and other devices are now going to be able to participate along with the rest of the world. So there's a lot of elements to it that you're going to love. And of course, if you're in the areas you were just talking about, Adam is called the father of voice AI. He started working on Siri in 1993. It took him 18 years to develop it. And when Steve Jobs saw it, he made him a deal he couldn't refuse. And then he went on and started and founded other major companies. So this is the latest one that is going on. But I say that, and I got off a little tangent, but US Playing Card Company, they want to partner up with us because they have a mass distribution network, and they know you go anywhere in the world, and I excuse me for saying this, but virtually every magician on the planet knows Richard Turner. Okay?
Yeah, definitely.
Adam knows virtually every magician on the planet because Adam has brought in every top magician from Penn and Teller to just across the board to his company, Viv Labs at the time, which was the company formed after he sold Siri, and to come in and perform for them. At the same time, he's gone everywhere in the world to see every magician. So he knows every magician on the planet. Virtually every magician on the planet knows me. And between us alone, we have a profile of, I've been seen by about 1.4 billion people, by about 1 billion in China alone. So I've been seen by about 1.4 billion people. And they know me by face and by hand. Adam, they know by reputation. They might not know the name Shire, but all you say is, have you ever heard of Siri? Yes. Have you ever heard of, your Android device? Have you ever heard of Bixby? Yes. Every hand in that theater will go down. I would say, raise your hand if you've never heard of this name. So he has a profile of about 3.3 billion people by association of his products. So between us, we have a name and recognition of about 5 billion people on the planet. So that's in itself kind of amazing. So that's going to be able to
and I think, the other 3 billion people on the planet don't have access to electricity, so it doesn't matter. The idea, how did you meet with Adam?
Well, it's a fun story. He, like I said, he brought every magician under the sun in to see him. And he said and this was told me by another, I'll just say, billionaire. And he said, have you heard of Siri? Said, of course. He said, well, the inventor of Siri said the one person on the planet I want to meet is this guy, Richard Turner. And I was performing at the castle that week. So he flew in by private jet and to meet and hang out with me. We hit it off, became friends. And then we've done a lot of fun things together. He'd pick me up in a private jet and we'd go hopping. We'd go to New Orleans to have dinner. But it was also a surprise. A person who was a big fan of mine and is obsessively practiced. His name is Rick Seedman, Seedman, and he's doing extraordinarily beautiful gambling work. And he's a lot of it. He just tried to reverse engineering from watching me on TV. And then so now I've been working with him intimately. He'd come and live with me. And anyway, Adam wanted to surprise him by meeting what he called his idol. And so Adam picked us up, my wife and I, a private jet, went there. We got to this place in in Savannah, Georgia area. And he rented an entire riverboat, huge riverboat, that set up this giant reveal where there's an audience, and Adam's talking to Rick behind the scenes, and Rick goes, I just got the program. There's this hard guy going to be featured. He's stealing my idea about being a gambling cowboy. And Adam says, oh, the guy's probably no good. And Adam's literally on the other side of the wall when they're talking where Rick thinks Adam is still in California. So anyway, make a long story shorter, we get in there and the theater's all set up, and I have my back to him, and my wife, back then we saw the mask going. So she had a mask on, hopefully not being able to be identified. And Rick had a friend that Adam co-opted to be our man on the scene in disguise, or help us with our logistics behind the scenes. So he goes, that's Richard Turner's wife. I recognize her. What is she doing here? And now he's confused. How did Richard Turner's wife escort him to the table?
He recognized your wife? Wow,
he recognized my wife. Yes, he recognized my wife, even with a mask on. And so now he's baffled and even more confused. So we sit down, he sits down front row center, and I purposely had my back to him, so behind my table. I had my back turned because I'm getting ready to start. And I had a mask on, hoping he wouldn't recognize me. Then obviously he goes, I think that's Richard Turner. And he said he wanted to try to sneak a picture real quick. And then all of a sudden I turn around and Adam and everybody, we all jump out and go, surprise. And he still had no idea that all this was done for him. And we went through and did a whole show. And then I spent 6 hours with him the next night, just going over technique. And then from that point on, we've been getting together quite frequently. I'll meet him in Hollywood. I meet him in Adam's house, one of Adam's houses, and in the castle and other places. And he's doing just amazing work. I scripted a whole show for him. So it's taken some stuff that I had on the shelf and I haven't used in a while because, put it simply, I forgot 80% of what I know. And I pulled out some of these things and he executes them absolutely beautifully. And you can find him somewhere. Rick Seidman, he has videos out and stuff, videos of him performing. But anyway, so that was, and as we were flying out, Adam knew I had these games that I created. And if you take Monopoly, 3 of the biggest classics of all time, Blackjack, most popular banking game in the world, Monopoly, probably the most recognized board game in the world, and poker, the most recognized or played card game. If you took the best elements of those 3 things, married them together into one entity, you would have the concepts of the play of some of the games that I created. And so you can play it with real money, you can play it for fun, you can play it for showdown bucks, you can play it for virtual currencies. So there's going to be all the different options. And anyway, so Adam says, you know what, I'll give you $100,000 to get this thing up and going. And if nothing else, at least you'll be able to play your own game because you'll be able to hear the cards. And then as we started, that just kept evolving and evolving now to where Adam has made some very strong statements, as has Charles, as far as the potential with what we're doing goes, because the second most talked about thing is gameplay. And the app world is bigger than all of football and Hollywood combined. If you put sports and Hollywood together, definitely. This is even a bigger industry. It's like 100.
I want to ask you about being blind. And the one thing that I wanted to ask you about being blind is there is a transformation that you've been throughout the Delt documentary. Okay. In first, you said, I'm not learning Braille because it's for blind people. And your sister said that for ages, you didn't want to use a dog or a cane. And it seems that something profoundly changed when Asa, your son, left the house and moved to college. And you discovered something that you can count on a dog, a cane, someone to help you. And my question is, what did you discover that changed your mind, that now you embrace the fact that you cannot see and you need someone to help you?
Yeah, well, part of it, I was stubborn, okay. 2, I wanted my stuff to stand on its own. I was not a fan of the theme handicap makes good. I didn't like that. So I wanted to compete on a level with everyone else, not in a separate category. And so for the first probably 30 years of my performing, well, maybe for 34, yeah, probably 30 years of my performing life, if someone mentioned the fact that I had a vision issue, I would be very aggressive with them not in a very polite way. In a polite way, someone would say he's blind, I'd say he has a wooden leg. Or, I would have some smart ass reply back, because I did not like when people mentioned it. When they first came me 42 years ago to be on That's Incredible, which at the time was one of the biggest shows on television, they asked me to walk with a cane. I said, I won't do it. I turned down the biggest show on television because they wanted me to walk with a cane. And I said, then they came back a year later and said, well, can we maybe just interview your eye doctor? I said, okay, I'll go with that. So again, I would turn down big things if they were going to mention it. So I didn't like the theme "handicap makes good." So that was one thing. And also, I've been in the martial arts. I started the martial arts in 1971, and I hold a 6th ranking black belt in Wadokai, Shotokan. I've trained Taekwondo, Jukido, Tang Sudo. So
you said that you need to do the black belt exam or test in Tijuana because it was illegal to do the test the way you wanted to do it, like with 10 fresh black belts kicking the hell out of you for, I don't know, for how many minutes. So they
3 minutes,
did
3 minutes each round.
So they did the test in Tijuana because your master, your karate master, was so afraid that if something gets wrong, he will be in jail. So it was that intensive.
Yes, it was. In fact, I can show you all 10 rounds because it was covered by ABC, and it was the front page of the Los Angeles Times sports section. And you're right. It was and here I'll just tell you a little aside. For years, people would say, I would say I did it the way they did it, and they go, "No, you didn't." I said, "Yes, I did." And when they wanted to give me an honorary black belt because I had trained for years and I had taken my lumps and I developed a level of skill that one of my sensei said, "We want to give you an honorary black belt." I said, "No, I want to do it the way the top guys did it, which is fighting 10 men in a row." And my sensei, John Murphy, he believed that if a boxer can go 10 3-minute rounds, a karate guy can go 3 10-minute rounds. He just upped the ante, upped the stakes by saying, but it has to be 10 different fighters, which means you're getting tired, they're not, which takes it to a whole new level. It'd be like Muhammad Ali fighting Frazier and Foreman and one after the other, whole different dynamic. And during that test, first round, I did all right. I did take one hard psychic right in the solar plexus. Second round, I had my nose smashed. You can actually hear this sound, and that was my nose popping. And
one can see the fights in the documentary, in the Dell documentary, in other documentaries. This is there is like the interviewer asks you, you can see how you're going to fight, and then you said, "I don't know. Let's find out." Okay, so it's
sit and watch.
Yes,
and
yes.
And if you look at my expression, I was pissed that he asked the question. You can watch me on interviews, and I wasn't aware of this till when they started doing Delt. They asked for all the footage of all the shows I've been on over the past 50 years. And whenever that subject came up, you'd watch my expression turn to mad or,
definitely. Yes. One can hear you mad. This is why I ask, something happened when your son Asa left the house.
That's what I'm going to pivot to for you. And so that was the way I approached things for probably 3 decades. And then my wife, Kim, she said, "Share it, tell people." He said, "People want to help you." I didn't want to be helped. People want to help you. And I said, plus it inspires people. And so I finally evolved. And when the rest of my retina degenerated, and I went from legally blind to totally blind, then I could not walk alongside somebody and be able to tell where I was going. And let me just back up for one second, give you a picture of how the conditions I was fighting under. Take a pair of sunglasses, okay? Take a spray paint and spray the front of the glasses with black. So now there's a big giant hole. Take the sides of the sunglasses and take sandpaper and just rough it up till it's a blur. That's the condition I fought under. And I didn't even realize this, Roy, till about 2 years ago, when I would say I fought on their level, and they would say, "No, you didn't," and I would be mad at them. "Yes, I did. I went 10 rounds. I had a broken right arm. I fought 3.5 rounds with a broken right arm. I had my groin kicked up in my throat. After I was done, my spit bucket was full of blood from all the nose bleeding, and on and on and on." And then I finally occurred to me, He said, you didn't do it their way. They couldn't have done it your way. And that's when I finally realized what they were saying when I said I did it the way they did it. No, I did it in a way they could not do it. It never occurred to me. It was only 2 years ago that this finally got through my thick skull that test under those conditions will probably never be done again in history. Somebody that is fighting under those conditions survives 10 men in a row. And partly in the States, they pack you full of all kinds of padding, headgear, and everything else where you can have a baseball bat swung at you and you're not going to know it. You know, mine were basic kickboxing rules. I had my boxing gloves, mouthpiece, and a cup, and you know, I have just a tank top on the front, and away I went. So, but anyway, so my wife would say, share with others, accept help, and finally I had to get over my own ego. It was my own ego that was getting in the way, and I finally realized, okay, yeah, I need to accept help from others, and I help others and accept help from others. I mean, just yesterday when I flew in, the guy behind me said, "Oh, let me get your bag down for you, please." And okay, sure, thank you very much, very kind of you.
And this kind of behavior would not be possible for you like 10 years ago. If someone would have said, "Let me take your bags for you," you would say, "No way, I'm going to do it all by myself."
Yes, except it was probably I started evolving probably about maybe 20 years ago, is when I started accepting things and realizing I'm not Superman, even though I still like to believe I am. And there are times and situations that I appreciate the help from others, and so I'm thankful. And my wife is the one that, you know, encouraged me to do that. And when my vision went totally south, then I started I almost started depending on her too much, and when I wanted her, I would whistle. And she got to the point where she didn't like that whistle, because that was one of our ways of telling where each other were if we were in a shopping center or a store. And then finally she said, stand on your own, but accept help from others.
When your wife told the whistle story, I felt my heart broke, because she told it in such a way that it was like I think that she said, okay, it's like I was his walking dog. And then something happened. And I think, and again, your son Asa in the documentary said that only when he was 7 years old, he realized that he walks you and not the other way around. You walks him, but just he realized, no, I walks dad. Dad doesn't walk me because he can't see. And now I have, because what you just said, I have a very hard, intimate question that I would like to ask you. And do you think that you would have become the great Richard Turner, you know, the black belt karate and the motorcycle and the hiking and the magic and everything, if you would discover the ability to ask for help sooner? Because it seems to me that part of what made Richard Turner who he is, you know, the obsessive compulsive things, the 16 hours a day of practice routine, was part of it, and I would say a substantial part of it, the ego. And letting go of the ego would have resulted in a different Richard Turner. Would you agree? Have you ever thought about it?
Well, yes, I have. And I would not have changed it. I think that obsessive nature where I don't care what the obstacle is, I don't care how wide your splits are, I'm going to do it wide. And if you can do it this way, I'm going to do it that way, harder. I would not have changed that, because I think that pushed me to limits that other people that were cited, or if I accepted help from others, I would have compromised to a degree. I think I would have been less. But then there just got to a point to where it was a practical thing. And it didn't change my drive so much, but I think I would have maybe became more dependent on others and not myself, even though it's like I'm ramming my head into a wall rather than going around the wall. But I think the fact that I was stubborn enough to keep ramming my head into the wall till I broke through the wall was a better outcome and made a more accomplished Richard Turner than if I would have accepted help earlier.
And I think this is a very important message, because your lecture is about, playing well with the cards that you are dealt. And some of the personality traits that you possess are extremely staggering in the context of a high level achievement. But when throughout the documentary, when we see how you react or your relationships with your son, it is very, very demanding for him that he has such a demanding father, I think. And it goes again and again in the documentary that, okay, I just can't practice 16 hours a day, he says. It is impossible for me. Maybe for my dad, which is, again, Di Vernon said of you that you are the best card slide that you have ever seen, and he witnessed Charlie Miller. But maybe your personality traits are so, outside the norm that one cannot extract any lesson from your road, from your way of life. So you're so, outside the average person, giving your mentality, giving your personality traits. What can I extract? What wisdom can I extract from your journey?
So that's kind of a hard one, because I am kind of an anomaly. I'm kind of a strange bird, a strange character. And I'll tell you a quick story. Russia wanted me on a show called Superhuman Incredible People. How's that for a title? And it was all people that had extraordinarily high IQs and were gifted and above and beyond just the gifted. That's why they called it Superhuman Incredible People, not just incredible people. And I actually was brought over there, under the authority of President Putin's deputy prime minister, brought me in the country, because this was during COVID and the doors were closed. And one of the questions they asked me is, what is it like to be one of a kind in the world? So, and of course, I gave some smart ass response to it. My wife says, here's the thing. I cannot ask people to work on the same level that I do. And it's just, I'm a little over the top. I'll just give you a real quick, for instance. My wife and I
over the top, 18, 16 hours a day. There is a documentary of you and Di Vernon when you're walking down the aisle in your wedding, you're holding deck of cards. You're practicing with a deck of cards. You were missing from your wedding, and they searched you, and they found you with Di Vernon dealing seconds. What do you mean when you say a little bit over the top? You don't know what a little means in English, Richard. I'm sorry. You don't know what, a friend of your wife said that during, you're making love with her, you practiced one-hand shuffles. This is not a little bit over the top, Richard. I'm sorry to tell you.
Just insult myself even further. We've now done it where I've shuffled a deck in each hand at the same time. We're making love. I had to take it a step further, and my wife's got a great sense of humor. So, but anyway, yeah, I know, and that's what Asa said. He never stops. He stops to work out. He said, it's kind of a rest, but not really. That was considered my rest, was going to the gym and spending 2 hours working out on a a very, very high level. And I'll throw in a little aside on that, back to the vision. So I have a very rare visual condition called Charles-Bonnet. And it's a condition where a person who has lost their sight should see nothing. But in my case, I see my subconscious projected in front of me like it's on a giant movie screen. So I don't see black. I see every color under the rainbow, every image that's ever been taken into my brain, projected in front of me, and they're all floating around two-dimensional images, but they're layered three-dimensionally, and they move and undulate. So there's this constant movement of all these thousands of colors, patterns, shapes, and I can take any image and instantly zoom in on it, move it up, turn it around, turn it over, so I can resolve complex problems with my virtual reality. And that's one of the things they want to test, is how a brain that has no input, meaning there's no visual input going into the brain, has massive output. And my brain will be able to register that it is seeing something when it's impossible to see. And I will be totally blindfolded, and I've already done this before. I'm totally blindfolded in every way, so there's no possibility of any kind of light coming in, and yet that does not change the brightness of all the things that I can do. So I brought that up because it was going to interrelate to something else, but age.
Okay.
When I remember.
So, with your permission, I would like to end with two questions. One is, I never see a comparison between you and René Lévin. René Lévin, the Portuguese one-handed.
I knew Ray
Yes,
Lévin.
yeah, I know that you knew. I'm just telling my audience. René Lévin was a one-handed magician, and he wanted to be a magician. No, he was a magician, and then he lost his hand. And all magic books were written for people with two hands, and he had to reinvent everything from scratch. This is, I think, in one of his books, he says that he had to reinvent everything for a one-handed magician, and he could do things with one hand that normal magicians cannot achieve or accomplish with two hands. And it seems that there is a base to compare the work of Richard Turner as a blind magician and the work of René Lévin as a one-handed magician, both very accomplished, very talented, in the top of their field. What's your take on that? Because I'm sure that, during, in the past, you thought about it, what's the difference and the similarities between the journey of René Lévin and your journey?
Ray was an amazing guy. I loved him. He would always say, "You are my hand. You are my right hand," and I would say, "You are my sight." That was just one of the things we said back and forth to each other. We filled each other out. I have another friend who's similar to Ray Lévin, named Monty Gilbert. Now, he has less than Ray had. He has no hands. He has two fingers on one hand, and he's doing beautiful card work. He's probably about in his 30s now. Monty Gilbert, you have to watch for him. But with Ray, I think we both had a similar drive. We were not going to go down, and he figured out his ways. And I'll just show you one thing real quick, that how I would have to push the envelope one step further. Can you see my deck? Let me give it to you. Can you see the deck?
Now we can see the deck. If you can just, now, just a second. Stop moving. Now we can see, yes, now we can see the deck. When you hold the deck like this, I can see the deck. Okay. If you could just lift your hand a little bit or lower the, yes, now we can see the deck perfectly.
Okay, I'll try this. René had a way of doing a one-handed shuffle, okay? And he would strip the cards out by putting them on the table.
Yes, on the table.
I'm going to start this over again because, like I said, I should have gotten this.
What we are witnessing right now, just a second, for my audience, what we are witnessing right now is a one-hand false riffle shuffle, okay? This is a riffle shuffle done with one hand, and then the two halves are stripped away. Okay, so I'm just going to explain my audience what we're about to see.
Yes. I had to take what Ray did and take it to another level. And this is a shuffle. You can see it, the cards being shuffled together. And then I actually would strip them out, bring my hand, I'm going to take the cards back apart and put them back together. When Renee did it, he actually had to use the table to strip them out. So I took it one step further in that I accomplished the whole thing within the hands. And when Renee saw me do that, he had to admit, that's much better. And he was going to say, can I do that too? I said, of course. But
I have never seen Renee does it the way you do. Whenever I saw
Renee,
it
on the table, he shuffles them and then he takes them out off the table.
Okay, and the last question that I would like to ask you, there are many stories that you showed on the documentary and on the mafia and Mr. Diamond. I'm not going even to start with the Mr. Diamond story. I'm going to give a link, but this is a mind-blowing story. Is there any particular story that you haven't shared up until now in the documentary or in other places and said, this story I have never told anyone about something from my past that you said, I wish I could tell this particular story?
Two very famous contemporary cardmen. I won't use their names because they're still alive and people would know who they are. They're very accomplished cardmen, and they came to me and proposed me to play and cheat against some Asian guy, big high player, and they wanted me to do this stuff. They said, there's not 5 people in the world that understands what you're doing. And they came and they said, will you consider it? And I said no, so they did not give me the details of that particular offer. But if I said their names, the people in the States here would know it. And of course, they would probably kill me for sharing it or denying that it ever happened. But I did have one witness when it did happen. And of course, they were witnesses to each other. That's one. This other guy I'll just call him by his name, his initials, RD. And one of his partners was one of the Bonanno family out of New York, which is one of the 5 major crime families. And that was one of his partners. He asked me for years to come deal at his game. He said, you can do by yourself what it takes 4 of my mechanics to do combined. And I kept turning him down. One time he said, just come to one of my events. And I said, okay. So I was his guest and I was driving in his nice little limo. And as we're driving up, he said, I have to tell you, everybody here own mountains. That's a euphemism, meaning they're all rich. And in fact, the place we went to, the guy literally owned the mountain. So we're going up this mountain. The driveway was probably about 2 miles long. Halfway, you came to this 2-story guardhouse. So we had to check through the guardhouse. Then we come up to this big mansion. And huge mansion. Go inside, and when we walked through, and then when we got into the one area, it was like I walked into a Las Vegas casino. Everybody in there had stacks of $100 bills. Everything was all cash. It was the minimum bet was $100. So everybody was walking around with stacks of $100 bills in their hand. And there were crap tables going, blackjack tables going, and roulette. They had a table piled full of cocaine. They had open bar. They had nude dancing girls doing pole dances. And I when I walked in there, I said, I have entered the den of iniquity. And I thought, I'm not going to be able to get out. I can't just turn around and leave. So I decided to find out what artifice his his mechanics were using to take the money at the tables. So now I'm standing behind one of the blackjack tables, and at that time I could perceive images out of the corner of my eye. Like I said, it was a blur, but my brain filled in what it could not see. So I'm looking out of the corner of my eye, trying to determine the artifice, and the person was doing a second deal with a peak. Okay, so I'm standing there, and all of a sudden, the guy sitting at the table turns to me and goes, "Hey, Richard, it's me, Joey. You've been to my place in La Costa." La Costa is where the mob had their beach houses, okay? He goes, "Yeah, you're not playing here, are you?" I said, No, Joey, I'm just a guest like you." He goes, "If Richard's playing, Joey's leaving." And if I would have been on the other side of that table, he would not have been quite so nice. If I was lucky, he may have just cut my hands off or cut my throat. But I was just sitting there behind the table, not dealing the table. But that's a little quick story for you.
Wow. Thank you. I don't know how to thank you for your time and effort. We just had 2 hours of brilliant, amazing, inspiring stories about your life and about practice and about you know, I consider myself a guy who likes to practice, and I carry the deck of cards, and I practice in the second deal and bottom deal, and I practice like Juan Tamariz. I have this 3-side mirror, and I love to practice. But witnessing your practice routine with just it let you think how accomplished and persistent and a man can be, that a man has no limits. And I will say that, in Hebrew, the word man, Adam, comes from the word land, Adama, which means unending potential. The man has unending potential. And I think that you go to church, so you get the gist. A man was created with unending potential. And I think, witnessing your life, witnessing your work, and chatting with you for the last two hours demonstrate more than everything, the idea is that a man has a no ending potential.
Yes, and that is so true. Man is only limited by his own imagination.
Yes, and one thing that if you believe that you cannot do it, you're absolutely right. Because
exactly. That's why you limit yourself. If you look at yourself, like you said, we are created. We are created in the image of God. And God took dirt, created an eyeball. Man took dirt and created a camera. God took dirt and created a brain. Man took dirt and made a computer. God took dirt and made a bird. We took dirt and made a jet. So our abilities are unlimited. We are a small version of the grand master.
This is great. And what can I wish for you? I can wish you grandson. I can wish Asa get married and you get, I don't know if your grandson will be the queen of spades or the granddaughter will be the queen of spades, but I wish you a happy marriage, a good health, many new brand unsealed deck of cards, many whooshes sound of a one-hand shuffle. And next time, have you ever been in Israel?
I've been all over the world. Israel is the one place I have not been to, and it is on my top of the line bucket list.
So please, I will email you my personal phone number. Please, when you visit Israel with Kim, it will be our true pleasure that you come and visit. We live in Samaria, which is like when the Israeli story in the Bible was created. So Richard, thank you so much. Thank Kim, and thank you for all the things that you contribute to our beautiful art called magic.
Roy, it was my honor and my pleasure, and I'm so thrilled that you have invited me. And just for the record, I've been a big fan of Israelis in Israel, our church has paid to relocate 25,000 Israelis from Russia to Israel. So I'm a big fan of Israel.
This is great. And as Israeli, I hope I wasn't too rude interrupting you. But again, I told you in advance, I can't say, I can't signal anything. So I need to interrupt. So I truly sorry if I interrupted your stories too much.
I never thought you were interrupting at all. And let me ask you just a real quickie, and you can cut this out if you want. Would you like me to take my computer and show you my 6,000 decks all stacked up right behind me?
Definitely. Yeah. It will be great.
Okay. Well, it'll be kind of weird because I'm actually going to carry my computer because the camera on it. Yes. And you'll have to tell me when I'm in the right spot. So give me a second. I'm going to unhook my cord. Now this is my office. I'll just kind of scan around. This is my card off, and over there is where I won the first championship with Siegfried and Roy.
Yeah, I remember.
And then
we have Richard Turner with Diverner.
Yeah, I like I said, I'm just going around now. I'm going to have to figure out where I am.
And you're heading
the Siegfried and Roy.
And we have Penn and Teller Fulas.
Penn and Teller Fulas. I've won the Academy Awards multiple times. Okay, now I'm going to see if I can find a closet.
Where do you live in the States?
We live in the San Antonio area. We have a lovely 19-room home with went out the wrong. Okay, here's my hard closet. Let me turn on the light. Let me pull the lights back up. Okay,
guys, what you're witnessing right now is a 6,000 decks, 6,000 decks, and arranged by, I think, year. Yes, this is year of production.
Yes, and so I'm just kind of scanning around. I don't know if
this is amazing
for you.
This is amazing. But Richard, those are the expensive decks, the unique decks.
These decks cannot be redone because they made them on the old press, and that's why magicians around the world begged me to sell them. And then our gold seal bicycles, the cardmen around the world. I think, let me see here. I have
this is amazing.
This is about 40,000 decks of these. This is not. That's a gold seal bike. No, this is a gold seal bike. When they have the gold seal on it, that means there's actually a card in there that says tested and approved by Richard Turner.
I'm so embarrassed that I showed you my second poker playing card.
I never saw a thing.
I don't know. Are you familiar with this kind of deck? A second that like it is a little bit cheaper.
Oh yes, they're called seconds, and I will not tell you the reason why they call them that or why they sell them.
Because they are cheaper. They are not good. They are not as good. They are defective.
Yeah. Yes. Are you still there?
Yes. Now, but you need to. Yes, but you need to tilt your camera upwards. Oh, yeah, yes, very good. Yes.
Anyway, so now you had a quick tour of one of my offices.
Wow. Richard, thank you so much. And I need to rethink everything because, just watching the documentary, the Dell documentary, gave me so much energy and motivation to, start retraining again and practicing again. And since that you show me this one, can I ask you just one last question? Let's say you said that you have like a very long practice routine. Most people cannot practice 14 hours a day. This is out of the question. But let's say that I have 2 hours that I'm willing to practice. As Canio said about, how he practiced. Let's say that I want to practice 2 hours a day. In your opinion, what is the best way to do it? Just work on one single slide, or just move from one slide to another slide to another slide? How would you suggest a magician that wants to improve his technique to practice?
That's a really good question. And this is how I would tell them to approach it. Take one thing. Say you're going to, I'll just use the second deal since we talked about it. First, analyze what is your objective. And then you take your hands and you start making those hands move and do the movement that you're trying to learn, the slide that you're trying to learn. And you practice it in super slow motion. You'll sit there and you analyze every exacting element of what those hands are doing. And you practice it until you decide, yes, that's what it should look like. Don't rush it and practice like this. Super slow motion, analyzing everything that you're doing. And then you slowly will speed it up. And then what I do is I turn it into a subconscious habit. In other words, I'm walking in the grocery store. I'm just pulling out a second, put it in back. Pull it out a second, feel it, put it back in the deck. I'm in the movie theater. I have my little, I call it my survival kits, a little close-up pad with rubber band on it with a deck of cards, put it in my lap, practice everywhere I am. As soon as I get in the car, practice to pull out my practice pad. Before I even put my seatbelt, put that on my lap, put my seatbelt on. Okay, so that way you can practice anywhere and everywhere. And like I said, I turn the move into a subconscious habit. We all have nervous energy that we're burning off. We're tapping our fingers, we're tapping our toe, we're twiddling our thumbs. That's wasted energy. It's like a car idling. Car idling is going nowhere. It's doing nothing. It's just wasting gas. You take that wasted energy of twiddling your thumbs and you practice moves. And like I said, you practice them slowly. And then when you start getting them, you speed it up. And then you just keep doing it till that information is embedded in the synapses of the brain. And it becomes, like I said, a subconscious habit. And then it might be 6 months, it might be a year, it might be 10 years later. You go, by golly, I got it. So that's how I tell people to approach their practice, one thing at a time. Just analyze it till you have every exacting element in your brain, and then
you don't alter, Richard, and you don't alter between slides, because you don't alter.
That's how you take a break. You 90% of the time is on that one thing. Your break will become doing what you did the last thing. And then to keep that up, then that's your break. I will then practice my stud seconds as a break. And then it goes back to the focus. And this is the learning period. Then after that 2-hour period, we'll call it, as you call it, a 2-hour period. After you've got that, then you might spend 1, 2, 3, whatever, how many hours you have to review the other things. It's like exercising. If you work just one muscle group, and then the next time you can work another muscle group and then another one, the first ones, when you go back to them, they're sore again. You have to maintain what you've learned while you keep adding the pyramid.
Oh, this is great. This is great. It has so much wisdom it can be applied in so many domains. Part of the domains that I'm in are, Judaism and biblical studies, and another domain is the AI, the academia, and being in the world of research and computer science, and the other is the world of magic. And those kind of techniques, do it very slow. Know what you want to achieve, what is your true objective is, and just follow the procedure one step at a time. This is so crucial, and again, can be applied in so many domains.
Exactly. And then you handicap yourself. Once you get to that point and you've now got it down, your muscle memory and your brain is able to do it, then I call handicapping myself. I will use your deck of cards, that old deck of cards. I will add 2 or 3 or 4 cards into it. So I now have a 54 or 56 card deck, which is harder to deal with.
Let me ask you, please, a hard question, because, you know, amateur magicians usually don't replace cards often. In Israel, new bicycle deck of cards cost approximately 20 shekels, which is more than $5, okay? More than $5. Therefore, amateur magicians, when they start practicing, they will use a deck of cards for, I don't know, for over a month. And this, if you probably know how a 1 month old deck constantly being used looks like. It is very thick. And you change or alter or replace decks every 2 days or every day.
Worse than that. I used to go to 3 to 6 decks a day. Now what I do is I perform with new decks, and I practice with I practice with the decks I use in a show. So I don't quite consume so many. But for a show, I might use a deck for 30 to 60 minutes, and then it becomes a used deck. So I fortunately, because I have a relationship with U.S. Playing Card Company, I have a lifetime supply of cards. And what you saw there, I have another area that is like, we're talking about 40,000 decks stacked up. So I have a lifetime supply of cards, so I can afford to do that. But that's rare. So you have to go back. When I was younger, I could not afford that.
And many many amateur magicians, when they use old, thick, used cards, they waste good practice time for bad decks. So you might want, to change or to replace your deck once a week at least, if you're a beginner, in order don't waste good practice time. Like Richard said, there is like the nervous energy. Don't waste it on used, bad, ruined decks. Would you agree?
And what I would do is I'd have 3 decks, and pretty much anybody can afford 3 decks. One is that old deck. 2 is the medium one. The 3rd one will be your performance deck, if you're talking about a low budget. So you practice with your medium deck, and then when you want to handicap yourself, you practice with your ugly old deck. And if you can do that second smoothly with that old deck, then when it's time for performance, you jump ahead to that nice new clean deck, and you use that for your performance, the medium to make sure you're able to do your skills with a newer deck, and then you handicap yourself with the old deck.
Okay, Richard, I think that I wish you everything I could. I know what I wish myself. I wish myself that in the near future I would be able to see you personally. I won't shake your hand because you don't like being people shaking your hand, but I will give you a big hug. Big Israeli hug.
Is accepted.
Yes. So thank you so much. I wish myself to meet you in person in the near future. It was a wonderful, wonderful conversation. Thank you so much again for your time.
Roy, it was my pleasure. And again, thank you for inviting me on and all the nice things you said. I'm very honored of that. And it was a real pleasure for me as well.
Okay, thank you so much. מה? כבר נגמר? אל תדאגו, יש עוד המון שיחות. ואם עוד לא נרשמתם, תירשמו לערוץ, תלחצו על הפעמון ותהיו חלק מהקהילה המופלאה שלנו. נתראה בשיחה הבאה.